Welcome to the Leadership Podcast series with your host, William Corless of Yellowwood, in association with Enterprise Ireland. This is a series of podcasts focusing on leadership development for business leaders who want to lead better and scale faster. Hear from subject matter experts and thought leaders offering different perspectives on strategy, leadership, culture, and new emerging business trends. Enterprise Ireland, in collaboration with Yellowwood, bringing best-in-class insights for you, your team and organisation. Keep tuned for monthly updates on www.enterprise-ireland.com.
Welcome to the Workplace Podcast. Joining us today to talk about the AI-savvy leader is David de Cremer. David is currently the endowed Dunton Family Dean of the McKim School of Business at Northeastern University, where he's also a professor in management and technology. David is also an advisory board member at EI's advisory board for their global AI projects. David, very welcome to the Workplace Podcast.
Thank you, William. It's my pleasure.
So, David, as you know, I've made lots of marks and notes and everything on your book, and I'm going to make a guilty admission here. So they say you should never judge a book by its cover, and I nearly fell into the trap when reading the summary of contents. I had this dawning to say the chapter headings. I thought this might be light on AI, but boy, was my assumption very wrong. This book is laden with information to educate people on what AI is, what AI isn't. It's a playbook on how to adopt AI, with excellent examples how organizations executed AI adoption well, but most importantly, learning from others who implemented it poorly. And then on top of that, and this is where I made my assumption, it is layered with leadership and management best practice. That is some feat. Kudos to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your kind words, and very happy to hear that. It was my aim to achieve all of that, but to your point, it's not easy to bring everything together in one book and then make it accessible and readable for everyone as well. So it's been work in progress for several years, but I'm also pleased with the outcome. Yes.
I would like to talk to people about my own journey with AI over the last couple of months. So I've been using AI, like AI Summary for Zoom that we're now recording this on. I use a ChatGPT for promoting the podcast or assisting me with different parts of my work, like proposals, or even using Descript, which is an AI app to help edit the podcast, and then DALL-E for image creations. There's a whole plethora of AI tools there. And a lot of listeners might be listening in here. How might I apply AI? Because it seems to be that AI is coming thick and fast at us. And should we be looking at that, or should we wait for other people then to make the first move?
It's a very good question, and it goes to one of the main points right away. As you say, AI seems to be something that people need to have. So today, whenever I talk to any business person, regardless of the industry, people will say the biggest risk seems to be not to have AI. So the simple question that any guru would probably tell you is, well, William, yes, it doesn't matter how big the company is, no matter what the size of the company and the customer base is, yes, you have to apply AI. So I partly agree with this in the sense that, yes, you need to know about AI. Yes, you need to understand why AI is here and has penetrated so deeply in the business world already, because it started off, don't forget, with, we see the last few years, AI is being applied to a lot of things societal. The governments want to use it as well. They want to automate. But now we're really talking in the last few years about changing the fabric of work itself. And that becomes very threatening suddenly, because this is your daily life. Your daily work life is going to be affected. But how is it going to be affected? And how is my boss going to deal with this? How is the company that I work for is going to deal with it? Or if I have my own company, what is it that I need to do? So question marks are more around than ever, I would say. And this has led me and motivated me as well to write this book, is let's first take one step back for your own company, for your own job to judge what is AI really about? What is it that it can do? And what is it that it cannot do? So when I talk about an AI savvy leader, I'm also talking about what position does AI with its perks and its downsides have in your work life? And that's an important question I think every business owner and every person working for a company should ask. Now, when you ask that question, then you're going to see you may not need AI for every little job or task at the moment. Because one of the big things that we see is most business leaders, and let's say executives in their 40s and 50s, they weren't trained to deal with AI. It wasn't around. It wasn't part of the curriculum. They never had to manage it. So they leave it up to the tech experts. Tech experts are not business experts. They're not asking the right kind of business questions or leading your company. So what we see right now is a bit of a disconnect there. Yes, we make the investments because we have to. It's the biggest risk of not using it. But then once it enters the company, the questions we should be asking is how is it going to affect the current workspace, the people working in it? What kind of new jobs do we need? Do we need new jobs in everything? These questions are not being asked anymore because the business leaders don't have the expertise to understand AI in relationship to these questions. So the tech experts take over right away. So these questions are not being addressed. We end up in a situation where 87% of digital transformations today fail. So no value has been created, but money has been spent and everyone's frustrated. So yes, it's an important question. Do you need it everywhere? And you don't. You need to realize in business that AI is a tool. It's a tool that can help you to achieve several goals. And it's not only the goal of efficiency and productivity. Obviously, that's the one that's on the front page of every newspaper, every magazine, and every podcast to say so. It's going to increase productivity. It's going to increase efficiency. Yes, it could if it's implemented right, if people don't have resistance to work with it, and if leaders do their job to make it part of the work culture. And that requires collaboration. And then if you think about it like this, I'm pretty sure right now some business people are already going to say, maybe there I don't need it. And here I may need it.
That's the beauty about this book, David, is you get people to really think this through to say, actually, do I need to apply it? And if I do, in what way? Now, a great point that you made earlier on was that disconnect between tech experts and people who know the business. So that comes in different ways of the people who are actually spending money on this, and they're the sponsors of the AI adoption, but also actually who are the people that's going to affect on the front line and maybe resistance to that. We'll go to that later on. But you say that there's three compelling points that make it's a no-brainer, the book. You say it's an excellent tool for learning in a VUCA world. It's the level of competitiveness through production and innovation, and also it's the economics of adoption. I think that really, really salient points there. But here's the thing is when we talk about that, then those 3 points, then is that resistance piece there is some people will say, well, there's some myths about AI that this is going to dispel people. The point you make and other people make is that sense of co-intelligence, that it's not going to replace people. It's just going to enhance, like a tool that you were saying earlier on.
Yes, that should be the ultimate goal. But to be clear, will people lose their jobs? Yes, some people will lose their jobs. And that has been the case in history every time that a new technology was introduced. Now, what people don't think through very much is, and I'm going to make a few points here, is that yes, jobs will be lost because some jobs need to be automated because it is less costly. It makes economic sense. And look, we're in business, so economics plays a role. Now, will everyone lose their job? Not really, because there's a few trends at play. First of all, AI is getting cheaper, but at the same time, you've heard as well, towards the future, what's going to happen because it needs so much energy? The platforms that are being used, the chips, we don't know. We don't even know what the costs will be and what the acceleration rates will be in those industries, whether we can basically make AI as cheap as it can be, that we can replace every job. Let me illustrate this. AI is not going to replace jobs at the really top of the organizational chart, where it's about leading the company, really making the most important executive decisions. It's not going to replace people in the cheapest jobs because it's too expensive for that. So it's going to be really in the middle there where the battlefield is for both blue and white collar workers, with the consequence that these people, their jobs will be partly automated, and you see they'll be dropping to lower paid jobs. That's going to be a big problem because it means we need to see what are we going to do with these people and their skills. That's where the augmentation part comes in. Because the big question is really, and this depends, of course, on your ideology and where you're coming from, but is the primary function of AI to enhance efficiency, enhance productivity? Or is the primary function of AI, as we've always defined it early on, to serve humanity, meaning we're enhancing your efficiency, but the bigger picture is we're actually enhancing human intelligence. So people can be better at being human, but in efficient ways, which is a much more holistic approach. And that's the one that I advance in the book as well. Organizations can take that holistic approach, but that requires that leaders are much more involved by asking the right business questions in relationship to taking care of their workforce in terms of improving their skills, but not only in terms of productivity, but just let them grow in their careers. And at the same time, creating business value for all stakeholders. So that's a much more holistic approach that you need to take on the long term. And that is sometimes missing in the discussion right now. It's really like, okay, it's do or die. You lose your job or you don't. Another thing that I see, and this really depends on the culture, is companies quite often have a tendency to say, yes, of course, we're going to automate, and they have a very strong desire there because of cost effectiveness. But when you talk about the jobs of the future, people will all have their opinion. But if you really look at what is happening in reality, it's not as much. And the reason why I'm saying this is when I talk to companies, I do hear them saying, yes, David, we understand augmentation is also important. It's not simply automation, because if you only keep talking about automation, it's just replacing people. That's as simple as it is. But it requires a deeper thinking exercise, and that is where companies shy away from. So I will hear comments like, yeah, we don't really understand completely augmentation yet in our context or in our industry, or I don't really know what it means. Automation is straightforward. It makes sense. Augmentation, basically what they're saying is they realize augmentation is costly, because what does augmentation mean? It means, okay, in which jobs are we going to put AI? Okay, that's one thing. How are we going to implement it in the job so that the human also stays involved, which most customers and stakeholders want? But that means I have to train these people to deal with the AI. This means I need to implement AI in a way that's intuitive enough for the human to work with and that there's no resistance. This means that I need to have the right infrastructure. Probably I need to hire new people who have talents to bring the human and the technology together. And then I have to look forward to what is it that I want to achieve with that augmentative potential. And that means, what is this job going to be in the future? And how is it going to create value? As you see, that's a much deeper thinking exercise than automation. And I do see a lot of companies, not that they necessarily have bad intent in shying away from this discussion, but simply because their business leadership is not prepared. They don't understand AI in terms of the augmentative potential, and they don't understand what it means in terms of making AI work for the company, because they limit their contribution to accepting an investment, yes or no, and then asking the tech experts again to drive it.
I like in the book that you mentioned so many times society and the ethical approach to adopting AI and having those considerations of not just the employees. And another point you make in the book quite well is about how it's going to impact the customer as well. So I like that there's that systemic thinking going on. This is why the book is truly a great read. And when you were talking there about how that replacement of jobs happens with any new technology, and I remember reading a book a number of years ago called The Victorian Internet. And it talked about how even with the telephone coming in, that replaced the telegram, and that put a whole lot of people that were highly skilled out of the work. Would we go back to telegrams? Probably not. Again, as part of my research for this, I was listening to a very insightful podcast with an AI expert that you mentioned in the book, Ethan Mollick from Wharton Business School. He did a brilliant podcast with Ezra Klein of the New York Times. He was mentioning all the different types of language and terminology, like prompt crafting is going to be a skill. You were talking about hiring people with those skills. And then just different programs like Bard and Claude and Copilot and Gemini 1.5 and all these different programs. And he was raising the point, and it's a bit like what you were saying, is the struggle that's going on is most universities are talking about the struggle with ChatGPT. And what Ethan Mollick is saying, and the point he makes out is that he actually leans into this challenge, that business struggle. And then he's saying that he's doubling down as there's an actual need for critical thinking here. So it's actually going to enhance society, much like the point you're making there, that what we're missing here, especially in the world of fake news and disinformation and misinformation, is that it's actually going to enhance society.
I fully agree. And Ethan's work is very dominant and leading in that respect. I think we all agree on this. The thing is how to make it work, of course. So as a business school dean, I've taken up the challenge there to put this in our curriculum, to make people AI savvy enough that they can be responsible business leaders who know how to use AI to create business value for all stakeholders. So that's becoming very central in what we want to do. And this relates to what you're saying here. Can you use AI and understand AI in a way you bring it in the game? Because yes, I want my students to use ChatGPT. I want everyone to use ChatGPT. But what I don't want is what many companies today will say, hey, use the AI. And what many governments will jump on is, oh, you need to do the digital upskilling. And they focus on that only, which actually means AI is going to be there. And I want you to start thinking like a computer so that you can work with it. And if you look at it from that point of view, then basically, yes, then it's technology first and human second, because we're bringing in AI because it's more effective, it's more rational, it's much more calculative. So it should be more reliable, which overall in certain tasks, it definitely is. But that's not the perspective that we want. That's not what Ethan Mollick is saying. What we're saying is you need to have a behavioral, human-centered perspective towards the use of AI, which means, yes, AI is going to be in your life, and you need to see it as a mean to an end. The end being humanity, the mean technology. So humans first, technology second. And that implies the priority should not be to say, you need to think completely like a computer because then you can make AI work for you, because then the focus is only on efficiency, as I said earlier. The point is you need to understand AI and be able to use it as a tool to the questions and the goals that you have, you as a human being or you as an organization. And that requires obviously critical thinking. So just to put it in the context of education, for example, because you referred to it, will be I allow that students, yes, use ChatGPT. This requires, however, that professors, faculty have to do examination differently, do evaluations differently, rather than just asking, write an essay paper when Elon Musk, almost 2 years ago, this is the end of homework. Yes, if you stick to the old system and say, like, I want you to reproduce and write an essay. We're not going to do that at the university anymore. We're going to say, yeah, you can write the essay, but that's the input. Now I want you to personalize it and say, what are your goals, your career ambitions? So what ChatGPT may have generated, how are you going to apply that? Because ChatGPT, look, AI cannot anticipate because AI is not an active participant in our society. And I can give you many more examples of that later, which means it has no understanding of what certain decisions may reveal in terms of consequences to yourself? And it's that kind of thinking that we need to examine in universities, which is called critical thinking, because you understand what you want to see answered, you understand the goals and why you're pursuing these goals, and AI is going to help you to generate ideas about that. You're going to think about it, and you're going to apply it, but that's your job. So we're not outsourcing cognition entirely to AI. We're outsourcing cognition to AI when it comes down to repetitive tasks which are in closed systems, meaning closed systems is where there's no real deviation, where there's no volatility, because everything's stable. AI is perfect. So that's why I always say management by algorithm. You can manage in a very stable environment because everything is metrics today. When it comes down to volatility, and leaders have to deal with dynamics, with volatility, but people in their lives as well. Life is unpredictable, we always say. Then that's your decision. And AI can help with that. That's the perspective that we all have to adopt in our education and in the way we run our businesses, and especially in the application to society, because then we can truly say AI is serving humanity.
So you mentioned earlier on then the disconnect between technology people and business leaders. So if I'm someone trying to implement AI or learn more to say, does this apply to me? What advice would you give to people to get used to AI and its functionality and how it might apply to their business? How might they experiment or find out more about AI?
I love the fact that you're referring to experiment, because that's one thing that a lot of people seem to be forgetting as well. And partly it's because of lack of understanding, and the other part is because of the massive presence of gurus yelling everything's going to change, and there's no time to waste. There's such a sense of urgency, a fear of missing out, that business leaders don't think anymore, to say so. Experimenting is the crucial aspect of all of this. It's not going to happen right away. Oh, AI is here and now it's going to help me and augment me. No. As we know, AI, even if you have the same prompt, sometimes it may generate different outcomes. So we don't necessarily understand completely the model in itself, and that's just becoming more and more complex. So what it means is, yes, experiment in order to get used to it. So this is how I see the business education in our business school as well, for example. Get used to having AI around when you have questions. Ask ChatGPT a question and see what it generates. Learn to give better prompts. But prompt engineering, by the way, is not going to be the job of the future, because like I just mentioned, sometimes the same prompt provides a different outcome. So that cannot be a job that's unstable. The job that for the future that's going to be is, yes, you can give the right prompts and then it generates something, but it's what is generated, which is insights. Can you transform the content into knowledge? That's going to be the job of the future. A content creator, a knowledge creator, because that knowledge only you know, because you know which questions to ask. So yes, experiment there. You have to do it, because also in companies you bring it in, and that's why we call it pilot phases. And AI is always a pilot experiment at first. But a lot of companies, and again, because business leaders sideline, they don't understand the investment decision has been made. Tech people take over is, no, we have to try. And we have to see whether it fits with the jobs that you have currently. If it doesn't, you have to rethink the job. Put it in the workforce. If there's too much resistance, it means business leaders are needed to facilitate and provide meaning to that AI. Why is that AI here? What does it mean in your job? What does it mean in your career? What does it mean for the organization? And then see, okay, if there's less resistance, what is it that is needed that people can work with that AI? See, that's a tech-savvy leader, an AI-savvy leader. So this is how they need to be trained more, and this is how they have to look at it more. Again, the cost effectiveness of an implementation plus augmentation strategy is, of course, more. The cost is higher there than a simple automation. But an automation is a short term, because you lose out on the human skills that are needed to move from content to knowledge in responding to the right questions in a volatile setting. And that is what AI can't.
I think what you're raising is some very important points, and you're talking about automation versus augmentation, and then it's getting to know the language of AI and what it is and what it isn't. So you're talking us through that, and you're introducing the words like prompt engineering and prompt craft. And then there's some people here and they don't know the difference between, would say, large language models and then supervised machine learning. There's all these terms. Can you guide us through those so people have a better understanding?
So, first of all, I want to say, as a business leader, as someone who's not a computer scientist or has no interest in becoming a computer scientist, yes, AI is going to be around, so you need to have a minimum understanding. Again, this is why I'm saying AI is a tool. That this does not mean that if you understand ChatGPT, that you also need to know in 5 years' time which large language model will be used then. This is what I need in my education. That's a wrong kind of thinking. First of all, we don't know today which large language model will be dominant in 5 years. No one knows. Second of all, it's about getting the skill to be able to use AI as a tool to help yourself. What you do in 5 years is, because you have a minimum understanding of AI, we train you in the skill of agility. So then when there's a new large language model, you have the ability, the human ability for lifelong learning and adaptation. See, that is what we're trying to do in terms of our education. This is how employees should be trained as well. So going back to the core of your question, what is then a large language model? So, for example, everyone knows ChatGPT, and everyone said, okay, it changed everything. Now we're talking about artificial general intelligence as if it can happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Before ChatGPT, we said, oh, no. AI cannot be artificial general intelligence, which means it's not only human-like, it will be able to do whatever a human can across every task and context, which is really, why do you need a human then? Because then it can move on to super AI, singularity, and everything. There's a certain wishful thinking there, I want to say right away, because ChatGPT is not necessarily a new dimension of AI that it has gotten closer to consciousness. It didn't. It's AI that we always knew, but it just got so much better. And we're in awe of it because now you can talk to a computer and the computer seems to have a mind of itself. So today, AI is human-like. Yeah. It's a computer that acts and decides and communicates now in ways that seems intelligent like a human being. But ChatGPT is still in its essence relying on data. That's why you hear things about, OpenAI violates copyrights because of course it scrapes completely the internet and every book that's out there. So that's part of it. So AI will always go back to data. It's the data that it takes. The reason why it's so powerful is because it's become such a strong predictive model. So this is a new term again. ChatGPT is a predictive model. It is extremely well in predicting the next word in the sequence, so it can form sentences. And because it's so extremely predictive in what the next word should be, because it has all those data and it's been trained over and over again, it's forming sentences in a way that a human would do. And it's the impression that we get, wow, this is like talking to a human being. But if you dig a little bit deeper, and this is what you read in the literature, and when you listen to more critical thinking, you'll see concepts like hallucinations. You may have heard of hallucinations, which means that ChatGPT can probably write your paper, your essay. That's why we say we don't want to examine that anymore as the main product for your grade at university, for example, because he can write and he can write very convincing. But if you check, for example, hallucinations could be, he will refer to references that don't exist. Of course, if we don't check that anymore, how do we know? And that's another challenge there because today, 2024, I can confidently say in the last 2-3 years, everything you see on the internet, on Adobe, Acrobat, if you have your PDFs or your images, 10 to 20% is already AI generated and you don't know about it. If AI picks up AI generated data, it can be easily contaminated and we don't know about it. That's another risk there. That's why a human needs to stay in the loop. And that's why we need to check it. So AI has all these benefits, but you see as well, like with this large language model, it is still not an active participant. It can provide you. So there's a recent study, for example, now, very recent, that AI seems to be given more empathy than a human being. So what they did is let ChatGPT write a kind of therapeutic conversation and let a human have this kind of therapeutic conversation. And what you see is that overall, they evaluated the ChatGPT had actually more empathy. The thing was, they didn't know that it was a ChatGPT. Then afterwards, they were told it's an AI, and suddenly the ratings dropped completely. So you could say, oh, this is people just not wanting it. No, this is people looking for authenticity when it comes down to something that's uniquely human. And that's the same thing. If you bring it into an organization, we do understand at a certain level, it's still a machine. And you're right, that machine has no real understanding of your reality. The example that I always use is, this is the picture that I have of a cow, and a cow is standing behind a very big pole, which is about 2 meters in width, 3 meters. So you see the head of the cow sticking out on one side, and you see the buttocks of the cow on the other side. So an AI is being asked, how many cows are there? And it says 1 cow, 5 meters long, 1.50 meters high. You and I know, no, those are 2 cows, because a cow cannot be 5 meters long. The AI doesn't see it because these 2 cows are partly hidden by the image. So this shows they have no understanding of being a participant in reality and what that means. So that's a limitation. So going back to ChatGPT, for example, that's why it's so important, and that's the AI we're moving into, is AI generates, but it depends on human feedback. And this is what happens in ChatGPT. You ask a question, it generates. Most people will have the experience, or then you refine the question. You provide human feedback, and they will become more and more specific in what you're looking for. So you see, the big picture here is any AI, even ChatGPT, still needs a human to define the goal or problem, because an AI cannot define a problem that's relevant to you. And you still need to interpret the output. So you're still giving the input and you're still working with the output. Everything in between, yes, we can automate to a certain extent. And you see, that's how to use it, and saying AI is a tool.
I love that approach, and it is about AI will never be able to replace the human condition with all its complexity and nuances and cultural factors. And also, a part of some of the algorithms are written, and there's examples where bias has happened in the workplace with Amazon, and people will find that in the book. Speaking about examples in the book, there was a very good one where the Grand Chess Master Garry Kasparov had an experience with AI. Do you want to tell us about that?
So Gary and I, we wrote a number of papers together on AI based on, of course, his experience of losing to IBM computer in 1997, although he always will say, I only lost one game. The previous game I won. He considers himself to be the first human to have lost his job to a computer. So he's pro AI, just to make sure. But in the ways that we've been talking about, it can help you. So for example, what he did after his defeat is he organized several tournaments where he invited chess masters to play games, but then in combination with a computer. So he was really interested in, can the best computer available on the market and the best grandmaster chess, will they be the winners of the tournament? And it turned out they never were the winners of the tournament, that combination. It needed to be someone who's not necessarily the best grandmaster chess, and it's not necessarily the best computer. So it's really the interaction that's what he learned from it. It's the interaction and how to be able to use your human intelligence and your artificial intelligence. So he and I came up with what we call triple AI, a piece that we published in Harvard Business Review in 2021. We call it triple AI. First one is the artificial intelligence. The second one is human intelligence, which we call authentic intelligence, leading to augmented intelligence, the third type of AI. So you see, coming from the chess, you arrive at the same conclusion. Now, I want to add one note here. Chess, AI rocks and AI dominates humans. Some critics will say right away now, that's true, but chess is a closed system because it has fixed rules, basically. There's there's a lot of rules, but it's finite. So that's what I was referring to earlier. At the end of the day, it's a stable closed system. So that's where AI has indeed dominated. But as you know, like I said, life is unpredictable and leadership is volatile. You can't compare it completely with a chess game.
And this brings me then to the actual adoption then. And what I like is that you say by adopting an inclusive approach to AI, you have three benefits: feeling in control, reducing aversion, and increasing trust. So you have to get people on board for AI to be a success in your organization.
Yes, across the board. Yes. I mean, we call this an inclusive approach, and it comes from what I've been talking about earlier, where what we see is you approve your budgets. And what I see the whole time is because business leaders have a limited understanding, 70 to 90% of the technology budget usually goes to the adoption itself. Then AI enters the organization. It's left to tech experts. I mean, the most simple example is always, business leaders saying, we have so much data in our company. Everything is about data. We need to be a data-driven company. So I've hired all these data analysts and all these data experts, and they'll tell me what's in the data, and then I'll know what to do. And I said, you know what? If you think like this, you're an executive, you're overpaid, and your data expert is underpaid. And then they asked me, why are you saying that? Well, basically, you're saying you have no clue what the goal or purpose or direction of your company is. You're waiting for the tech expert to tell you what is in the data, and you'll adopt that one as your purpose, your strategy. So who's leading the company here? That makes no sense, because data, just like AI, because AI relies on data, as we've seen, even ChatGPT, is not running your organization because you may have the wrong data. Everyone knows the phrase garbage in, garbage out. That's the most simple example just to illustrate. It just doesn't work like this. You still have a job to do once it's adopted. But then most business leaders will realize, yeah, but wait a minute, I spent most of my budget already. So, well, because what you're telling me, and this is what I said earlier, it's costly augmentation. I need to implement infrastructure. I need to experiment, like we said. So we need to work with feedback loops. We need to correct models. So we need to have talents who can work on that. We need to prepare our people. So we don't only make them AI savvy, we also need to have feedback and think about what is it that they can do with the AI in their job to create additional value and to grow in their job. And we want to make sure that people don't sabotage or undermine it because they just completely resist it. I don't have the budget for that anymore. No, indeed, you don't, because you didn't think about those questions.
So here's the thing that some people will maybe be disappointed by, David, is it is no quick implementation of AI without a very much a well thought out approach, really understanding your businesses and business processes, understanding your strategy, understanding what are the outcomes that you're looking for, and then it's knowing where the information flows within the organization. Am I right in those assumptions?
Yes, I agree. And this comes from my experience as teaching executives at business schools in consultancy. I literally have, over the years, have met so many people who said, well, I mean, why are we still learning about interpersonal skills for myself or for my teams? It's all about AI. I need to learn how to code. I need to understand this completely. How is it that they can think like this? Because their wealth of experience, leadership experience, their wealth of knowledge about how to run an organization, they're just willing to abandon that right away. And they're so scared, apparently, that they just don't even see relevance of that anymore. I mean, we can't lose all that knowledge and experience that needs to be put to use. It's a little bit late to become a coder and compete with all the youngsters who are perfect computer science experts. So that makes no sense. But you see the fear is there, the fear of missing out, the sense of urgency, everything's going so fast. So again, that's the input of my book is, yeah, business leaders sideline as soon as AI enters. I mean, they've done their job and they basically are afraid. They're not part of the transformation process. So I call it becomes technology driving tech transformation. So of course, so AI is leading your company, data are leading your company, and tech experts are we're not trained as business experts. So that requires, again, that you think very carefully about the question that we started this conversation with, which is AI needed in everything? And if it's needed, how are you going to use it? Why do you want to use it? And can you make it meaningful to people? So that means, and this is the good news about the book, it's really if you're an experienced, seasoned leader, you know how to motivate people. The good news is if you become AI savvy in understanding what is AI about and what is really the function of AI, so the basic principles of how it works, you will see where you can use it, but because you're good at empowering people, you can make it meaningful to them. That's your job. Of course, you still need tech experts, but you need to be clear about the direction, goals, purpose, and empowering your workforce so that they want to use it. The rest, that's what tech experts do.
And that's the last chapter in the book, or one of the last chapters is about emotional intelligence. Accept that soft skills are the new hard skills and practice them. And this is why for years, I think soft skills were kind of seen as the weaker part, where soft skills are the way forward now.
Well, yeah, but you can think about it very logically. If we say AI intrinsically doesn't have these authentic human abilities, because research shows that not only people perceive AI as inauthentic, that it doesn't have authenticity, it's also the case because, like I said, it's not an active participant. He doesn't understand cultural sensitivities. He will not understand implicit messages or reading in between the lines. It just acts on what it sees, knows. It's purely rational. So that authenticity is extremely important. We only lose out if we say we make everything rational, which increases efficiency, productivity. Okay, but it's not holistic. Again, going back to one of the earlier terms that I used, we lose out on what defines us as being human. And this has been recognized more and more, not only in the academic literature, but you also see it now with governance, with policy making, because we're entering a stage where we will see a feeling economy, that the largest part actually of your salary will be determined by how good you are in dealing with people, your interpersonal skills. And this makes a lot of sense because this is not what we're going to use AI for. So you need to be authentic, you need to be able to do critical thinking, you need to have that emotional intelligence. And you see how quickly business jumps on it. Today with banks, for example, if you look at wealth management, look, banks started so many years ago building on relationships. People gave money to the bank in the simplest form. You got some interest rates on it and they used your money, they gave it a loan to someone else. But it was about relationships because they wanted to have people invest and bring money to the bank in its simplest form when banks started. Today, you have to pay a premium to have a human talking to you. So basically, human treatment has become extremely expensive. But that's also the skill that we need more. This is a very ironical example, of course, and I don't like that way it's going, but it shows what machine can provide and where we put our money. Same thing with, for example, today we live in a creator economy. So ChatGPT actually can make a creator out of everyone, we can say. So everyone can become creative. So what are the business perspectives? Does that mean that if everyone actually becomes a creator, everyone becomes an artist, everyone can do whatever, that means that you're not going to be paid that much more if you are very creative as a human being. That's one scenario. But if that's the case, then you can also imagine we're not going to pay anything anymore almost for art or anything because it becomes so available, so cheap, it becomes just default. Is that going to happen? No. What's going to happen is initially everyone's going to throw this on the market, but then we're going to start asking questions about quality. Hopefully, we will keep asking these questions. And what you're going to see is the premiums are going to be paid for what is truly authentic. And that's the bias that people have. When I told you, oh, AI seems empathic, but once you know, oh, it was an AI who wrote the message, you don't like it anymore. And that's what's going to happen. That's why your soft skills, your interpersonal skills, working your authenticity, and I say this to my students as well, I want you to learn to work with AI and understand what it means, how it's transforming your business. But I want you to see for yourself in your education, you develop yourself and see what you're passionate about, what it is that you want to achieve, and learn about yourself so you can use it for something that serves you. And that's authenticity. That skill really needs to be trained.
So I'm going to ask you in a few minutes just about how people might contact you and find out more about your book. Before I do it, I want to promote your book one more time. So you talk about here in the book getting employees buy-in, and it's about, I suppose, demonstrating that the AI adoption project is driven by concerns that align with human rights standards, fair and respectful treatment, explain the risks and the benefits that AI adoption brings for them, provides examples and scenarios that are relevant to their jobs, listen to the employees' questions and suggestions, and regularly update employees of how AI adoption is progressing and ask for feedback. Now, Dave, we're coming to the end of our podcast. I could talk to you for 2 hours on this more. This has been fascinating here, and so many people will have been appreciated that I have to thoroughly recommend this book for anybody that's curious about AI. So, David, if people to find out more about you, your book, your website, how might they do so?
The easiest way is if you Google David de Cremer and AI, you'll find many interviews with me about this topic. I have a website as well, www.daviddecremer.com. So you can find everything about my career there. Also, Stern Strategy Speakers. You will see my website there because I'm a global keynote speaker. It literally has everything in terms of media appearances, what I provide in terms of workshops. So, for example, just promoting very quickly, I have a 2-hour workshop where first hour I try to make you AI savvy, so you understand some of the principles that I was just explaining. The second hour, we talk about basically how do you govern, how do you regulate from a more authority position, so that basically it becomes meaningful for your teams, for your organizations, why AI is used. It's used as an incentive. So you can go to these websites, Stern Strategy as a speaker, www.daviddecremer.com, or just type in my name and AI and you'll find whatever you need.
David, thank you so much for joining the Workplace Podcast.
Thank you so much, William, for having me.
Thank you for listening to the podcast with your host, William Corless, in association with Enterprise Ireland. Our special thanks to the episode's guests for sharing their expertise with us. For our upcoming podcast, please follow our website, www.enterprise-ireland.com. Enterprise Ireland, helping Irish business go global.